And we are live. This is the Canada Hoops Daily Podcast. My name is Sheldon Alexander. Rate us, review us, like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, it's Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Again, just search Canada Hoops Daily. And of course, if you're going to YouTube, make sure you search Sheldon Alexander for all your Canada Hoops Daily content on the YouTubes. As mentioned, my name is Sheldon Alexander, and thank you for tuning in to this episode. I know normally sometimes I got my guy, Andrew Webster here with me, but I'm riding solo today. Solo in English. Maybe because I'm by myself, kind of tripping over my tongue, or maybe it's because I'm so excited because there's so much news to break down in Raptorland. Of course, we talk about the Toronto Raptors here. We talk about basketball, everything basketball, especially from a Canadian perspective. And of course, it starts with the Toronto Raptors because there's lots going on. Of course, the Raptors are on a West Coast road trip right now. And, you know, so far, so good for the Toronto Raptors. And I know the people are here because we want to talk about all of the rumors that are going on. And we'll get there. We will definitely get there. But we'll just quickly go through Raptors road trip. They lost. I guess before they went out on the road trip, because I think this was a key point of going out on the road trip, was the fact that you were playing against the Clippers at home last Friday. Raptors fall in that game 121-117, a game in which they led 109-101 with about 3.5 minutes remaining in regulation, but they weren't able to hold on to the lead, missing 6 straight shots as James Harden forced overtime on a personal 8-0 run. Then Harden just making free throws to start the overtime. Raptors fall in that one. Then they head out on the road, and they began that road trip against the other LA team, the Lakers. And that one was a loss as Luka and LeBron just doing their thing. 110-93. The Lakers win that one. But the Raptors were able to bounce back as they defeated the Golden State Warriors 145-127. In Immanuel Quickley's career, best game of his career for sure. 40 points, 10 assists for Quick on 11 of 13 shooting. He was hitting all the threes. He was hitting all the free throws. Quickley was just doing it all. It was a great showing for Immanuel Quickley, for a guy who's been, let's say, under a microscope here for the Toronto Raptors as of late. So it was good to see him have a really, really good game. We'll get to Quickley in a second. Road trip then continued as the Raptors took on their friend DeMar DeRozan and the Sacramento Kings with the 122-109 victory there for the Raps. Scotty Barnes being able to flip that game in the third quarter as he had 14 of his 23 points in that third quarter, which, built up the lead big enough that the Kings could not come back. Raptors winning that one. Of course, the road trip continues Friday night. Tonight, as you're listening to this podcast, or who knows, maybe you might be listening to this on Saturday. No rules. Listen at your leisure, whenever you please, right? But the road trip for the Raptors continue as they take on the Portland Trail Blazers, and an interesting matchup against Portland, as that's a team that just has a lot of moving pieces. They have done better than most would have anticipated this season, but a lot of moving pieces for them. Raptors hoping to get RJ back. I haven't checked my notes to get the updated on if RJ is back tonight or not. The last I saw was that he was questionable, but Raptors hoping to get RJ Barrett back as his name is involved in a whole lot of trade rumors as well right now. And of course, the road trip wraps up on Sunday with the Raptors in Oklahoma City to take on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Oklahoma City Thunder. And, of course, that game, anytime the Raptors and Shai and Lou Dort hook up, that's always a big, big, big deal, as, of course, some CanCon all over the place with the reigning MVP and the defending NBA champs. Always good times. But I know why the people are here. The people are here because, there was a lot of talk going on in Raptorland right now, right? A lot of discussion. And, one of the main reasons why I enjoy doing this pod, or one of the main focal points behind it, is I always want to be able to present people with the information, right? Like in this world in which our listening habits how we follow things, how we listen to things change, consumers still need aggregators, right? You still need people to feed you the information that you might not have the time to discover on your own. And, there's a lot of fight right now in the media about, journalism and real journalism and who's a real journalist and who's not a journalist and who's just an aggregator and all this stuff. And I'll dig into that a little later because that's a super interesting topic for me as well, that I enjoy talking about. But my main thing is I want people to understand the difference between what you're listening to, right? And my job, or I feel my job, or what I would like my job to be with this platform is to feed you the information of what's going on in Raptorland. I'll give you my information, which I believe is an informed information from someone who's worked in covering the Toronto Raptors and the game of basketball in this country for 20 plus years at this point. But my hope is that as I'm feeding you my opinion, you can join in with your opinion, and we as a community get to discuss what is going on in the beautiful game of basketball within this country, and more specifically with the Toronto Raptors, right? So, I give you my opinion. I'll let you decide. We'll get into that more in a bit, but understand the social media and online game, we manage our expectations accordingly. And I know what did I title this? What was the title of this pod? It was like RJ and let me find it here. It was like RJ and IQ are RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, and Jakob Poeltl on the trade block, right? And you name something like that on purpose, obviously, because that's what the internet is. That's the fact that, that's how you get people to watch your content. You have to come up with an engaging, title for how you label your content. That's how you're going to get people in the door. But even with that said, I think as a viewer and as someone who consumes a lot of content, it's still on me to understand what that headline is. And it's just simply posing a question. And the reason why the question is being posted is because there is a lot of talk out there, right, about trade rumors involving these three names and your Toronto Raptors, and just the fact that, I'll stand on it again. I believe media literacy should be something taught to both adults and kids in the year 2026 and beyond. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So much going on in Raptorland, as mentioned. It's because there's a bunch of different reports and a bunch of different headlines. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through a bunch of different headlines, a bunch of different stories, and I'll give you my opinions along the way. But I'm also going to make sure that I shout out the reporters who are out here doing the real work. Doing the work, building sources, talking to their sources, engaging with their sources to provide us with the information that we then get to debate, discuss, argue about with our friends and in the group text. So I'll start here, right? And I'm starting here purposely because the Michael Grange article I really think was really, really well done and just a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about here in terms of, hey, here's someone who is obviously a very reputable reporter who has sources and who did a really good job of presenting the story, exactly what Raptors fans were asking for, what was needed. And I don't want to give it away. So I'll get to Michael Grange's article in a sec, but I'm going to start here. So Josh Lewenberg, TSN, he says TSN can confirm Toronto appears willing to part with some combination of Immanuel Quickley, Jakob Poeltl, and RJ Barrett, or at least that's the impression that rival teams have gleaned from the exploratory discussions. That tracks both because the Raptors would need to include one or two of those players to match salary in any big trade, but also because those are the contracts limiting their financial flexibility going forward. Okay, so now we see the three names. We understand the situation that's involved there. We also understand the bigger context that obviously the Raptors at this point, you have Brandon Ingram, you have Scotty Barnes. I mean, CMB's been a revelation, obviously. Everyone's loving how that pick is looking, but basically you're building around Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram going forward. Heck, like Bobby Webster told us that from the start of the season, right? Like that was in our opening montage we did to start the season. We got the Drake song, What Did I Miss? And Bobby Webster sitting there in that interview, great interview, by the way, done by Danielle Michaud and our great SN feature team. But in that interview, Bobby Webster is talking about how the Raptors are building around Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes going forward. So like, we know that if you're paying attention, if you're listening to what's going on, right? So the reason why all those other contracts are important is because those are the big ticket contracts, right? You got Quick at what, 32 and a half. I think that's the number for Immanuel Quickley right now. RJ has one more year after this year. I think he's at 27 this year and then 29 next year. And then Yak, he's in the middle of a big time deal as well, in which his deal goes up to about 27 to 29. So those are the big boy contracts. And if you're the Raptors and you're paying all of these players money, and especially if you re-sign RJ going past next season, well, then you're talking about paying into the luxury tax for a team that is okay, but is not necessarily a championship contender. So how do you get better? How do you improve the team? How do you add to this team? Well, then that's why you have these rumors floating around about, Immanuel Quickley, Jakob Poeltl, and RJ Barrett, right? So there's a report from Josh Lewenberg. And of course, those things are flying. Those things are going crazy because, there's been so much talk about trading RJ over the last couple years. And it's for the reason of, well, do you re-sign him? Added to the fact that you've already signed Yak, you've already signed Quick, you've already signed Scotty, and you've already signed Brandon Ingram. So is RJ the odd man out? Or does something else have to give? Well, that's why we've had this season. And even if you go back to last week's pod, we were talking about the rumors involving John Morant, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Davis. There's names floating around. Then we get this from Sam Amick of The Athletic. And we've also heard this from similar things from Mark Stein and Jake Fisher of the Stein line. But this is from The Athletic, right? It says Domantas Sabonis is still worth monitoring. Also says teams other than the Raptors, while Washington, Phoenix, and Chicago are known to have some interest in Sabonis, league sources confirmed reports that Toronto is a legitimate possibility as we approach the deadline. It's worth noting that the Raptors' RJ Barrett, who is owed $27.7 million this season and $29.6 million next season, was drafted third overall out of Duke by current Kings general manager Scott Perry in 2019, when Perry held the same position with the Knicks. The two old friends shared a warm hug and extended conversation before the game at Golden One Center. So again, that's coming off the Raptors win in Sacramento. That was just today's Friday. I don't know the days of the week. I'm not going to lie to you. But Sacramento's game, that obviously was on Wednesday. And the interesting part to me there, right, is, okay, things we got to remember about Raptorland. Masai Ujiri is not here anymore, but historically, the Raptors don't leak. So if you're hearing things coming from the Raptors, or you're hearing things out there about Raptors players, you can assume that in most instances, it's coming from another team, right? And listen, I can say that as my opinion, but I can also just urge you to watch any NBA draft over the last however many years and pay attention to the years when Woj and Shams were leaking all the draft picks before they happened. You never really heard the Raptors pick get leaked before it happened on television. Okay. So I'm saying that to frame this, that report coming from Sam Amick, who covers the Kings, like, where that is coming from. This whole, Scott Perry drafted RJ Barrett out of Duke third overall. Like, it sounds like a nice story, and it's cool to frame it like, hey, Scott Perry really likes RJ because he drafted him third overall. But let's take a step back and remember, he drafted him third overall after Zion and Ja Morant. Like, everybody and their moms knew that Zion was going to go 1, Ja Morant was going to go 2. And if we go back to that moment in time in Knicks land, the Knicks were having all these crazy parties. I don't know who remembers that. There's a video of Fat Joe and was it Jada at a Knicks viewing party with Jesus and Mero, where they were watching the NBA lottery, and the Knicks fans are getting all hype as, they think they're getting closer and closer to the number 1 pick. And even in that instance, if you got 1 or 2, if you remember the hype machine that was going on behind Ja Morant and behind Zion Williamson at the time, right? Like, you just wanted to get one of those 2 picks. They didn't get the 1 or 2 picks. They ended up getting the 3rd pick, which again is RJ Barrett. So I say all that to say, it's cool to frame this as if hey, Scott Perry's a big fan of RJ Barrett because he drafted him 3rd overall. But come on, man. We all knew RJ was going to go third. We all knew Scott Perry really wanted RJ or Zion or Ja Morant. And so it's not like he made some like crazy leap to take RJ at 3 is all I'm trying to say here. So I'm trying to add some like, I guess maybe add my own media literacy to this to like read between the lines of some of this stuff that you're trying to be sold. Now, does that mean that the Raptors are not in line to get Domantas Sabonis? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not detracting any of these stories that people are putting out. I'm just saying that there's a reason why we hear about some of these things. And yeah, we hear these things because people want us to hear these things. But then let's take this to, another level here, right? Because if we're going to talk about, okay, who's on the trade block, and you heard I'm going to really break down the Michael Grange article because I think it was really, really good. So don't worry, I'm getting there. But if we stop here on this Domantas Sabonis thing and, the rumors that have been going around the league and NBA circles the last couple of weeks, obviously you heard about, Anthony Davis. And then there was a story about that was later refuted that Rich Paul requested a trade for Anthony Davis, and then that was refuted. And then you have that back and forth going on. You have the Ja Morant story still floating around, which in Michael Grange's story, it kind of, he has a quote from someone kind of, saying that Raptors probably aren't that interested in Ja Morant, which, as we discussed last week, I think it was going to be very telling, right? Because if the Raptors were in on Ja Morant, like Darko was an assistant coach of Ja Morant in Memphis. So you have someone who has very good intel on Ja Morant. And so if the Raptors were going to be in on it, you'd have it on good word that, hey, I have some insight into how I might be able to reach him, how I might be able to, steer his career in the right way, get him back on track, get him back into good standing, not only with the league, but with his team and with his new team. And we believe that he can do A, B, and C going forward. But again, Michael Grange, speaking to his sources, might not be a thing. I'll get to that in a sec. If we do stop here on this Domantas Sabonis for RJ, right? Because what the story is, or what the stories that have been put out, it kind of makes it seem as if a deal would be for Domantas Sabonis would include RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl for Domantas Sabonis. And I'm chuckling here because I would rather just have Yak and RJ. Like, I don't really understand. I definitely don't really even understand the Domantas Sabonis thing. I really don't. The Anthony Davis thing really makes no sense. Like, I get you're taking a calculated risk on Anthony Davis being healthy. And obviously, if there's a medical staff that you would trust, it's the Raptors medical staff, as they have a history of getting guys healthy. But the Domantas Sabonis thing, the Anthony Davis, it's like, if you have Anthony Davis at the peak of Anthony Davis's powers, cool. You could talk me into, if you told me you were getting a healthy Anthony Davis for this playoff run, you could talk me into that. I understand that world. Domantas Sabonis, I don't understand it in any way, shape, or form. Again, Sabonis, I'd rather have Yak. I'm not saying that Jakob Poeltl is as good as Domantas Sabonis, but the way that Yak fits into this Raptors team, the way that Yak fits in with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, in which he doesn't really need touches, right? Like, he's a complementary piece. He's a guy that, we talk about it all the time on this pod, where you need dudes in your lineup or as a part of your rotation who don't need the ball or don't need to score to be productive. They find other ways to impact the game. That's Jakob Poeltl, right? Domantas Sabonis is a double-doubles machine. He gets a lot of rebounds. He's had years where he's led the NBA in rebounding. But I feel like the Raptors, in their position and what they need a big body center, like a bruiser center. And I've seen too many years of Domantas Sabonis getting swallowed up in the playoffs, where he becomes, not that he becomes a non-factor, but he becomes neutralized very easily because he's an undersized big. And that's not what the Raptors need at all. Not in a conference where you could be going up against Joel Embiid or Jalen Duren, who's a beast. I don't know how much you guys have been paying attention to the Detroit Pistons, but you need to be. But even if you're going up against Cat in Mitchell in New York, you need big guys. Even the bigs in Cleveland, you need legitimate bigs. And I don't know if Domantas Sabonis is a guy that helps the Raptors, because you want to avoid having Scotty have to play those kind of center minutes, right? It's good in spots. Obviously, we've seen him do it a couple weeks ago. He had the 25 rebound game against the Golden State Warriors, and that was cool. That was dope. Credit to Scotty because he was able to do it. But you don't want to have to rely on that all the time. So Domantas Sabonis doesn't really fit to me in terms of a need of what the Raptors would have, or because the Raptors need a big guy to defend the paint, to like block shots, to rebound, to be an imposing position defensively. And that's not Domantas Sabonis. So I don't understand how that fits. On offense, I mean, I'd still rather have Yak. Yak sets better screens. Yak's better at rolling and finishing at the cup. Like, I just don't get it. And then that's before I even get to RJ. And I would just flat out rather have RJ Barrett than Domantas Sabonis. Like, I don't understand the rumors from any stretch other than this is just coming from the Sacramento Kings to try to stir up, some talk about one of their guys, because obviously that's a team in desperate need of a roster shakeup. Now, again, I'm not saying that, these reports are wrong and the Raptors are not going to do this. Not saying that. I'm giving you my opinion on if the Raptors should do this and what this would mean if the Raptors did get Domantas Sabonis. I just don't get it. I don't see the basketball fit. I also don't see the money fit, because Sabonis's contract, he's making like 45 a year. So if that's the case, right? And Sabonis's contract this year, he's at 42. Next year, it goes up to 45. The year after that, it goes up to 48. So if you tie that to Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, I just don't know if that's the next piece that you want to put that much money into beside those two guys. I think besides Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, I think you need a shooter, and I think you need a defender, and I think you need a defender like a post defender or a wing defender, and I think you need a big guy for sure. Domantas Sabonis is an undersized big, and anytime you still have to put Scotty Barnes in the paint where he has to rebound heavy, he has to block shots, like you want him doing that on the weak side. You don't want Scotty Barnes having to guard, Joel Embiid for massive stretches in a playoff series. It's not really where you want to be. So I don't really understand, like, especially if you're telling me you got to pay Domantas Sabonis $45 million next year. I'd rather just sign RJ at a lesser ticket than that. And I don't know if RJ is going to get 40 mil, but I'm just saying I would personally rather pay RJ that much, because the other part to me with RJ Barrett, he's been so good since he's gotten to the Raptors. And yes, he's had moments where he's been injured. Yes, he's had moments where, maybe the shot's not as consistent as you need, but I'm saying overall, this guy's improved. And I really do think that if this was a version of RJ Barrett that the Knicks had, I don't know if the Knicks would have been so quickly. Oof, pardon that pun. Sounds like I'm in that terrible commercial. But I don't know if the Knicks would have been that quick to give him up. Right? Because this RJ Barrett, like, he's been able to show off so much more of his game, right? Like that, him getting downhill and getting to the basket, him getting downhill and being able to find his teammates. He's just been so good. So I don't like the narrative about getting rid of RJ Barrett is purely contract talk. I don't really think it's basketball talk, because I think there's a world, again, if you have RJ, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, but if you piece the other two spots together well enough, your point guard and your next big, there's a world where those three guys play well together. And I've even said this at the start of the season. There's a world in which if you build your team correctly, and let's say you had RJ coming off the bench and like that Manu Ginobili spot where, listen, you just come off the bench and cook, and get busy, get buckets, and lead our second unit. Like there's a world in which RJ Barrett is such a valuable piece to this team going forward. Like, we think everyone can score now, right? Because the numbers are so high and everyone's jacking up all these threes, but there's still a difference between freewheeling scoring, in the first quarter, second quarter, and then when you really need a bucket. And RJ is a dude who you can give him the ball when you need a bucket, and he can get you a bucket. We've seen that in his Raptors tenure so far, his ability to do that. So overall, again, we're talking about this discussion about, would you trade, Domantas Sabonis for RJ Barrett? I'll put it this way. I know and I understand the contracts. The reason why it's RJ and Yak is because that's how the contracts would work to match for Domantas Sabonis. So I understand why that is contractually. But from a basketball standpoint, I wouldn't even trade RJ alone for Domantas Sabonis. So I'm definitely not trading RJ and Yak from a basketball perspective. So super interesting stuff there, right? And again, I'm not knocking the reporting because I think I like the reporting because, hey, maybe from the Kings' point of view, they are trying to float this deal out there. So that is news and noteworthy and worthy of a discussion. I just think a lot of times we never get past the headline and we need to break it down a little more, impact the discussion a little more than just the headline of, hey, Raptors are interested in Domantas Sabonis. Or sorry, Raptors are linked to Domantas Sabonis. Again, I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to see RJ go, right? If I'm being honest, like I want RJ to stay on the Raptors. I think it's just been such a cool experience to have him come back home and play for his hometown team. I also think the fact that you have to remember, right? That deal for OG Anunoby, it was really for Immanuel Quickley, and the Raptors were taking on RJ's contract. Like, that was the thought. The Knicks wanted to get out of RJ's contract. But since RJ's come to Toronto, I think he's outplayed that contract. He's been really, really good. So, and he's been really, really good in a scenario. And I mean, hey, we're talking about this on Friday, hours before Mitch Marner makes his return to Toronto. But in all seriousness, RJ coming back home and in his play, this could go in another way different way for a kid coming back to play in his hometown of Toronto for the Raptors. And RJ's outdone his contract. He's outdone people's expectations. So I don't know. I want them to keep RJ. I understand why they might have to move him contract-wise, because if you think about it, RJ has one more year left next year. And if the Raptors are really trying to improve their roster, RJ's probably the more valuable asset because it'll be harder for you to get out of Jakob Poeltl's contract, which has a few more years on it. And of course, he's injured right now and his back has been a major issue. So that's going to be hard to get out of that contract. And Immanuel Quickley, he's also been a huge topic of discussion lately. I'll get to Quickley after. Let me stay on this like trade talk stuff because I really do want to talk about this Michael Grange article. And the reason I want to talk about this Michael Grange article, as mentioned, I sort of touched on it earlier, right? But we live in a world now, and without getting it too like into the politics and the craziness that's going on in the world right now, but we live in this society now where there's a debate every day about journalism and what is journalism and what is the need of journalism. And maybe if I lighten the mood and shift off the like real stuff, we go to the, lesser serious stuff. And even the whole debate a couple weeks ago with the female reporter in Jacksonville, who was telling Liam Cohen to keep his head up. And then that turned into this whole debate and argument about, oh, she shouldn't be telling a reporter that, and she needs to do this and do that. And it's just like, everyone's just mad, right? And you got Pat McAfee telling journalists that they need to be quiet. And, it's about new media now. And it's turning into this whole fight. And my thing is, it doesn't have to be a fight. All we have to do is just be honest about what each of these things are and have an honest conversation about it. Because there's room for everybody. There's room for aggregators. There's room for journalists. It's just we can't conflate the two. And we can't demean the importance of journalists because those are the people who give Pat McAfee and myself and all these other people with platforms talking into microphones content. It's because of journalists, like actual journalists that are going in and reporting on stories and digging for information and talking to their sources and finding things out. And so, as we dive into this article, the reason why I find it interesting was because I was seeing all these quotes flying around beforehand about, Western Conference GMs talking about how they feel like the Raptors might be in a position where, I'm paraphrasing, but Bobby Webster might be feeling some type of pressure because he's new in the job, because he only has 1 year left on his deal. He might be feeling the pressure to make a big swing at the deadline to quote unquote save his job. So Michael Grange puts out this article, right? And it's funny because I saw a bunch of different aggregators put out the link to Michael's article, but they use the quotes from the Western Conference GMs. And I'll give you one. He says, I spoke with another on Monday, said, quote, I've heard multiple times that they are feeling the pressure to win, said one Western Conference source. They are interested in a significant move because they feel some heat to justify their jobs, close quote. And so those are the quotes put out there by the aggregators while linking to Michael's article. But to me, I found that if you just read the article, which is so good, there's so much even better information in there that actually does a better job of painting the entire scenario. And it was funny to me, and this is important to me, and I get that this might not be as important to other people, and maybe it's because I work in the industry, so I have a different understanding or appreciation for like actual journalism and like reading the full story. But there's so many other things in that article, right? And the reason why those quotes were put in there by Michael Grange was to give you a fuller picture of the entire scenario. So here's what Western Conference GMs are saying, but here's what I can tell you. And I'm going to just do what I like to call sometimes on this pod, Sheldon reads. Okay. Because I'd like other people to read as well, but I understand a lot of y'all don't read. So I try to be here to help y'all. See, I try to play the role of the aggregator as well to give you the information you need to make a much more informed opinion when arguing with your friends. But I'd like to think that the difference is that I'd try to give as much credit as possible to the people doing the actual work of going out there, getting sources, cultivating sources, and then giving us all the information. So in this article, according to multiple sources, Webster and the Raptors have had exploratory discussions on a multi-year extension to his current deal, with talks expected to pick up after the trade deadline. I'll continue. Certainly the notion that Webster is under any sort of expectation to pull a rabbit out of his hat to ensure his long-term future seem far-fetched if you watched him interact comfortably with a rarely seen but noteworthy group prior to the Raptors game against the Los Angeles Clippers at Scotiabank Arena on Friday. More reporting here. He says, well before tip-off, Webster was holding court with not only MLSE President Keith Pelley, the two have forged what is described by insiders as, quote, an incredibly strong, close quote, relationship since Pelley took over the reins at the Raptors parent company in April of 2024. But also, Edward Rogers and Tony Staffery, executive chairman and chief executive officer, respectively, of Rogers Communications. While multiple sources contacted for the article declined to speak on the record, there was a consistency in descriptions of how the relationship has unfolded in Webster's first season in charge. Quote, there's a really good vibe, said one. Close quote. Another quote. Everyone is comfortable with each other. The communication is good. It seems like there is a big picture view of the whole thing. It's kind of an old school approach to dealing with management. There's a lot of runway and no rush. Everything has cooled off since the decision to part ways with former Raptors president Masai Ujiri last June. They've really come a long way considering there was an executive search this past summer. Close quote. Said another. Everything is with a view to the long term. There was some pressure early on regarding proof of concept. Could Scotty Barnes take a step? How would Brandon Ingram fit in? But that's there in every job, close quote. So to me, this is a way bigger story, but that's not as splashy for the aggregators. And this is where, I'm talking the media literacy side of it, to where we need to understand what's happening, right? And you understand that aggregators are doing things to get clicks. And I'm not knocking that. That's the game. Media companies, like journalists, have to do the same things where they have to tweet out their article because they need to get clicks. They need to put out a headline that's catchy so that they get clicks. So again, I'm not knocking the aggregators, because the aggregators play a role in people getting to the actual article. But then I'm putting the onus on us as a consumer, as the reader, as the fan, to also read the full story. Get beyond the headline. Because I felt so much more informed, so much more relaxed after that, reading that article from Michael Grange, because it's giving you a full-on perspective of where the Bobby Webster's headspace might be heading into the deadline. There is no pressure to make some crazy move. And let's be honest, why should there be? Like, think about where the Raptors are right now. Okay, think about the season that the Raptors have had. If I were to tell you, okay, that we're sitting here, it's January 23rd, okay? And I were to tell you the Raptors were in 4th place in the Eastern Conference, and they had a record of 27-19. If I would have told you that at the start of the year, if I would have told you that this summer, you would have taken that in a second. You would be ecstatic as a Raptor fan, as Raptors media. So why would the viewpoint of anyone in the front office be, hey, we need to make like this big move right now to like really make a push this season? I get it. You can make an argument that the East is wide open this year because, hey, Jason Tatum's been out, right? And obviously Tyrese Halliburton's out. And while I understand all that, the Bucks are obviously having a down year. That's not drastically changing next season. Like, Jason Tatum will be back, cool. But that was always going to be a problem. Heck, Jason Tatum might be back in a couple weeks anyways. But to me, that shouldn't like spearhead the Raptors into like trying to just do something massive right now to maybe make a run when you're just now getting your franchise stable again. I think a big part of this season, right? A big part of, reality, or a reality check that's needed for a lot of people, is you're just now getting your fan base back. Like your real fan base, right? Like let me rephrase that. Your real fan base never left, right? But all the people who are casuals, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term. I mean that more in a term of, hey, when times are good, when you're winning, these people will be watching. But when you're actively losing to try to get a draft pick, those people aren't tuning in and night out, right? And I mean, really, can you blame them? Like, why would you expect? Story for another day. Taking's a whole other topic. Not even trying to go there. But the point is, your team has gotten back to a level of where you're talking about, hey, can we win our playoff round? Hey, are we avoiding the play-in? Like, you're back to respectability. Brandon Ingram has upped the level of where your franchise is with one swing. So why would you need to rush it and deter off of that when you're in 4th place? And listen, behind you, the Sixers are doing well. Joel Embiid's been healthy so far. They're easing him and pacing him through the season. They had a massive win last night where they looked really good against the Rockets. So you could look at that and say, hey, can the Raptors maintain 4th place? Well, I mean, the Knicks are in a free fall, and they're just above the Raptors. The Raptors seem to keep plugging away consistently. They're playing pretty well. But you got the Sixers just behind them who, they're still one injury away. You wouldn't be surprised if next week, knocking on wood, not wishing injuries on anyone, but history would tell me that Joel Embiid and Paul George aren't going to be healthy for the whole season. Then you got the Cavs, who have been injured this whole season as well. Garland's still missing time. When's he going to be back? Can he hold up through a full season again? You got the Orlando Magic. They've been disappointing so far. So, I mean, There are teams that could jump ahead of the Raptors, but the Raptors are in this fight right now where they're avoiding the play-in. And if you ask me, that's pretty damn good. So if you are in this position where you're the Toronto Raptors, right? Or you're someone who owns the Toronto Raptors, you're someone in charge of the Toronto Raptors, and you came in last year and you look at a season where, hey, well, we're tanking again. And, we don't know where things like go back a year ago. Okay. Before the trade deadline. So that means before the Brandon Ingram trade, obviously before you trade for you draft CMB, right? So if you go back 1 year ago and you look at where the Toronto Raptors were and where their prospects, for their future stood, you're talking about, is Scotty Barnes a guy? Can Scotty Barnes be the face of your team still? Is he the leader going forward? You're banking on, hey, is Grady Dick going to be a piece going forward? Are we still going to get something from Ochai? Is RJ, Scotty, and IQ, is that enough to get us back to the playoffs and just banking on depth? And I mean, we watched it, and I think we all came to the same conclusion where that wasn't the case. And even if you were still holding out hope, I think, and this isn't hindsight because we said it at the time, when they traded for Brandon Ingram, that was the Raptors telling you, to me, that they just needed to upgrade their overall talent because they saw where Scotty Barnes was at. And this is not a knock. Scotty Barnes is very, very good, but you still needed more talent either on his level or slightly above. You needed another high-end scorer. You needed another high-end player that you could pencil them in for this amount of points, this amount of rebounds a night. And so they went out and made that Brandon Ingram trade. To me, that told me that the young guys, you're waiting for one of Grady, Ochai, Jacoby Walter to pop. It wasn't really there. They needed an injection of talent, and that was the reason behind the Brandon Ingram deal. So again, my point is, if you go back to a year ago, before that deal was made, and if you say a year from now, you're going to be in 4th place in the East, of course you're going to take that if you're management. Of course, if you're ownership, you're going to look and say, hey, since we've got here, things are on the up and up. And I mean, hey, listen, I don't know, and we're probably never going to know, right? Because the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Like, who wanted Brandon Ingram? Was that a Masai thing? Was that a Bobby Webster thing? I know it was reported last year, I'm pretty sure, that, there was some dissension in terms of, I think Bobby Webster wanted to re-sign Pascal, and give him the max, but Masai didn't want to do that, right? So, obviously they didn't agree on everything, but they had to come to some conclusion, right? So will we know? Was that Masai? Was a CMB pick Masai, or was that Bobby? Who really knows? We know that Masai, before he left, he made sure that he was at least going to stay on board until after the NBA draft. He wasn't going to leave his guys and leave them with an NBA draft, right? So there's all these things. Who knows who gets the credit for it all? Who cares who gets the credit for it all? The bottom line is the Raptors are just in a position right now where I think you're okay. And to me, that article by Michael Grange was a great sign to anyone who follows this team, who roots for this team, that there's no panic move on the way. And again, that's not to say that they're not going to make a big move. They're not going to get Domantas Sabonis. I'm not I think we got to understand what these things mean, right? I think we got to understand the RJ Barrett deal is going to be done because of contract. And the reason why I don't really think the Domantas Sabonis thing makes sense is because you're just bringing in a big contract. And I think instead of spreading that contract or that value amongst 2 starters, you're splitting it on 1 starter who's not as good as the 2 pieces combined. Does that make sense? Hope I explained that well. It's just interesting time in Raptor land. And if I'm being honest, the thing that I think is really cool is just that the Raptors are back and mattering. If they don't make a move at this deadline, it's not the end of the world. They're still in a really good position. As mentioned, they're still in 4th place. Brandon Ingram has looked great so far. Scotty Barnes, beside Brandon Ingram, has looked really great this season. One of them, if not both of them, and you could make the argument both of them could be in the All-Star game or should be in the All-Star game. I wouldn't argue with you if you said that. But I just think this season has been going really well for the Raptors. And the move to me would just be to stand pat. See what happens. And I get there has to be a move made. Like, the more there's reports of Ochai Agbaji, his name's being brought up because the Raptors need to get under one of the tax thresholds. Right. So I understand that. But other than that, if you're talking to me about Ja Morant, if you told me there's a Ja Morant for Immanuel Quickley swap available, you could talk me into that. But I also think you're taking a huge risk of locker room, right? I think that's a big deal. A massive deal, right? Like vibes, especially in this city. We just saw how far vibes can go, right? Vibes and the Blue Jays, that led them all the way to the World Series. I think the vibes in the Leafs locker room right now, when you look around, the vibes flipped and all of a sudden they're on a crazy run, have gotten themselves back in playoff contention. And we're seeing the vibes in the Raptors locker room, right? The pictures after every game and everyone's flexing, everyone's having a good time. They're passing around the chain, like all of that stuff. You're seeing how important that is. And Quickley and RJ, we know their bond, obviously. If you just remove that to bring in Ja Morant, who could be a risk, who is, at this point, the opposite of those vibes. I don't know. It's a tough one. So Ja Morant doesn't appear to be an answer. I mentioned Anthony Davis. That's a huge risk because not only would you be bringing in Anthony Davis and giving up assets to get him, but then he's obviously going to want a new contract. And I definitely don't think you want to be in the business of re-upping Anthony Davis for big time money. So I don't know. I think you just reassess. The NBA has a way of changing a lot, like if you would have said that CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert would be enough to get Trae Young last year, nobody would have believed that. So this whole, hey, you got to figure something out and you got to trade RJ now because nobody wants Quickley or nobody wants Yak. You don't really know if that's the case. Things change really quickly in this league. So above all, shout out to all the people making their reports because it gives us stuff to talk about. And I just like having the ability to sort of dive a little deeper into these conversations because the Bobby Webster side of it, if you're Bobby Webster, why do you need to do something massive like right now? Play this out. The Raptors coming into this season, and there's a comment here. First off, shouts to anybody in the chat right now. If you're in that YouTube chat, really appreciate you. Make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button. Really appreciate you. That's how you support the Canada Hoops Daily Pod. But we got some comments here. Walter. I don't know why I just said it like Jack Armstrong, but I'm assuming that's how. Walter 10 says, my OG, first to do. How are you? Tanks are, I'm not going to repeat that, but hey, basically saying he's over tanks. I get it. No problem. Big shouts to you, Walter. Michael Edwards says, remember, we're quote, overachieving this year. So yeah, this is a season to learn what we have, how it looks, because clearly nobody didn't. Basically, to make big moves this year is to disregard what we've built this year. Yeah, I just think there's no need to rush it, right? Like what's the rush? And your point about seeing what you have, I think that's very important because there's going to be some important decisions coming up, right? Because like you're going to have to start talking about, well, forget about who's on the way out. Just think about your rotation. Like Mobo doesn't really get minutes. He's only getting minutes now because you're in dire need of a big guy because Yak's been out for so long. CMB's out. You tried to bring in Mo Bamba. That didn't really work. So now Mobo's getting minutes. And the more that you watch him, the less confidence that you have in him being a rotation guy on a really good team going forward. Grady hasn't really had a good year, right? So that whole battle for minutes between Grady, Ochai, and Jacoby, Jacoby had his moments, but then he went down with injury. And that's really the big thing with some of these young guys, right? Not only are they trying to find their way in the league and get minutes and earn minutes, but they're trying to stay consistent. And part of that consistency is availability. So this year, to me, it's just really good to see where the Raptors are at, to see someone like Scotty Barnes, who, I remember last year, at the end of last season, you looked at his numbers, and my question was, did Scotty improve? Right? That was my question, my honest question after last season. And it wasn't a knock. It was just more so, who is Scotty Barnes? And I think what we've seen so far this year, I would like to think that we've seen an improvement from Scotty Barnes, but I think a big portion of that is due to Brandon Ingram being there and taking away some of the pressure, but also some of the needs that you might have been placing, that the fan base, that me, then, Raptors media, whoever, been placing on Scotty. Meaning like, hey, Scotty, like, how come you never dropped 40 and won a game last year? Just one game, And now, without Scotty like needing to do that, because you look at Brandon Ingram, we've already seen games where Brandon Ingram has just put the team on his back and won you a game, right? How come Scotty hasn't hit the shot late in crunch time? We need a bucket. Like, he doesn't have to do that. And now he can do the things that he's better suited to do, which is like play defense, rebound, handle the ball, bring the ball up when needed. Scotty Barnes, I would say he's improved so much because there's been so much more clarity in terms of what the needs are on a night-to-night basis. Whereas, to be honest, and it was somewhat unfair, they needed everything. They needed him to be like that dude. And that's a huge burden for Scotty, right? I don't think he's that guy. And I don't even think Brandon Ingram is that guy, but I think the combination of the two, we've seen so far that you have something there. So now the goal going forward has to be to build around it, right? What are the pieces that fit around it? And there's one last thing I wanted to talk about here. I mentioned, hey, Scotty, where is that game where you dropped 40 and won us a game, right? Well, we saw one of those games earlier this week from Immanuel Quickley. And Immanuel Quickley has been an interesting topic of conversation in Raptor land this year. And the reason why I think Immanuel Quickley has been such an interesting person in Raptor land is because, how do I phrase this? I think, with the advent of social media and the advent of, how people consume content, things that we didn't care about before, like we wouldn't have cared about Immanuel Quickley making $32.5 million a year and where that ranks among other point guards in the league. We never would have cared about that before, right? But because social media and those numbers are so readily available, and this head-to-head, this guy or that guy debate is like part of our daily discussion, things change now, right? The fact that you have Twitter accounts dedicated to specific players changes a lot of the discourse, right? Because if my fan account is about player A, then player B is just taking away from player A's shine or the credit that player A deserves. And now my whole quote unquote livelihood of running a social media account that is based on getting clicks to said social media account, that now is based on what I'm going to put out. So I'm going to put out content that's going to get clicks. Whether that is completely negative, I was going to say another word there, insane content, I think without me going too deep, I think the Raptors fans kind of know, the people who are in the online webs know what I'm talking about here. Because there's a lot that Immanuel Quickley deals with if he just looks up his name on social media. And so I kind of want to talk about what's fair and what's not fair and the discourse that has become Immanuel Quickley, right? So start here. I understand that folks are frustrated and why they're frustrated, right? It's a big boy contract, 32.5 mil a year, 5-year deal. The anticipation was you're giving him this deal. He's your point guard. He's your lead guard. He is one of the centerpieces of your team going forward. And to date, the results have not met those expectations, right? I said it earlier, but just a reminder, when the trade was made, RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley to Toronto for OG Anunoby, the talk was that trade was really for IQ, right? And RJ was a throw-in. RJ, we were taking on his contract, right? And instead, RJ's been the better piece so far in that deal that the Raptors have gotten. Immanuel Quickley has been inconsistent, right? There's been highs, and the highs have been super high, right? We were just talking about one. What a game he had against the Warriors. But the lows have been very low as well, right? And we've seen the in-between. We've seen even somewhat of the in-between here and there. Like if I go back to that Charlotte game, he had a horrible shooting night, but still had the confidence to knock down the game winner at the end of the game, right? But I think, especially when you're talking about your lead guard, and I know basketball has changed a lot over the last decade, 5 years, however you want to phrase it. So it's not the same game that you or I might have grown up on, where the point guard is the extension of the coach. You know, it's your job to get the team organized, to get guys a good shot, to set the pace, set the tempo, all of those things. I understand that the game has changed a bit, but I still think there's something to, if I'm paying you like one of the top point guards in the league, and I bring you in from a team like the Knicks where, you know, you were the energy guy off the bench, right? But now I'm giving you a chance here. I'm giving you the runway to go. And I think it's interesting because I look at Quickley, and what you want is consistency. But I think the high variance in his performance has made it so difficult to assess whether or not he can be your starting point guard now and in the future. And I think that's the problem. Because to me, it seems like he's hot for a week, then he slows down, has a bad couple games, then he misses a couple games with a nagging injury. And then he comes back, and then he's hot for a couple games, then he slows down a bit, and then he's out with another nagging injury. And it's tough, right? Because you gave him the money, and I understand why you gave him the money. You're retaining an asset, right? I get it. His contract was up, and I bet you if the roles were reversed and RJ's contract was up, they would have re-signed RJ, and we would have been talking about Quickley right now, right? So I get it. You made a trade, you gave up OG Anunoby, and you get pieces back, and you want to retain the asset management. Totally understand it. But I do think there's two sides to this, right? So Quickley's been inconsistent, and I get it. But when he was on the Knicks, he was the energy guy off the bench. And why are you an energy guy off the bench? Because you're not consistent enough to start, right? Those are just the facts. If you're consistent enough to start, the Knicks weren't, this amazing team. So if you were consistent enough to start, you would have held down a starting position. But then they got Jalen Brunson, and then, hey, now you're Brunson's backup. You're obviously not going to surpass Brunson. And I mean, nothing that's happened since has told us that you should have surpassed Brunson in the depth chart. So cool, right? But you get Immanuel Quickley in the deal. And as the Raps, you bring him in, you give him the keys, you let him run the team. And the hope is that more consistent minutes and like the confidence from the organization that, hey, you're the starter, that can translate. You hope that that translates into consistent success. What actually happened is, if you remember, he got here, he played okay. There's some feeling out. Then there was like a 10-game stretch where I remember maybe it was after the All-Star break, and Darko really worked with them. And, he had like a 10-game stretch where he was like running the offense. He was the lead guard. His assist numbers were up. He was still scoring. He had that, remember, it was when he first came, it was a 3-point shot, or he had that floater game. He'd drive and he had that floater game going. And I feel like we've seen less and less and less of the drive and the floater game, right? We've seen less of that, I feel like. But either way, on top of what was going on with Quick, the Raptors' focus at the time wasn't necessarily on winning. And I got to give a shout out to my guy McAuliffe because he talks about this all the time, right? And it's a negative side of tanking. And the negative side of tanking is that the culture that you're building within your team, you lose some of that culture because winning isn't the most important thing. So when you then try to then flick the switch back and be like, hey, nope, we really want to win games now, it's not that easy because you build up some bad habits, right? You settle for that three more when you know, hey, as a point guard, my team needs points right now. I need a bucket. Let me get to the cup. Let me get to the free throw line and put some points on the board to stop this run. Those little things that like the high level point guard does, right? And I'm not saying Quickley's got to do that. That's a Chris Paul. That's a Kyle Lowry. We watch Kyle Lowry do that for how many years? I'm not saying he's going to turn into Kyle Lowry in 2 years. It's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying there is more to playing point guard than just like what assist numbers are, right? There's more to being the lead guard. And I think some of that focus gets lost when he was either injured or then the Raptors were tanking. And then you had games where, hey, we're only starting this guy and this guy, but our other starter is going to sit. So RJ is going to play this game. And then IQ and Scotty are going to play the next game. And the reason why that messes up the flow is because what you're asking from Quickley or what you're asking from RJ or what you're asking from Scotty is going to be different if they're all in the lineup versus if only one of them is in the lineup. So if Quickley's playing and RJ's not there and Scotty's not there, well, now he's got to score more. He's got to shoot more. But if those guys are there, well, he can focus more on being the point guard, right? Getting them the ball, distributing on top of getting his own. But if you think about how the Raptors' last 2 seasons since Quickley's joined the team have been, the majority of the time has not been with a consistent starting lineup that is trying to win. Right? And hey, listen, some of this is on him. He hasn't been healthy. Last year, his whole season was derailed by injury. And I mean, that was a problem that Knicks fans and Knicks people were worried about, right? I always remind people of that report that Knicks front office did not talk a lot. But after the trade happened, there was a report that came out that said someone in the front office referred to, hey, now all the softies are gone. And that was in reference to RJ, Obi Toppin, and Immanuel Quickley, who were all first round picks for the Knicks, who were supposed to, get them back into being in good standing in the city. And they never really all lived up to expectations together. But then you bring in the Josh Harts, right? You bring in OG, you bring in Bridges, you build in. Clearly, you can see the different style of dude that they're bringing in, right? So we bring that back to Quick. And Quick, since he's got here, I mentioned that run as soon as he got here, played all right. But then the end of that Raptor season, oh, well, they're trying to tank. So now they're sitting 1 or 2 starters every night. Then the start of last season, Quick played, I think, in the first game, then got hurt. He only played like 33 games last year. And then if you think about how last season ended, even when you got Brandon Ingram down the stretch, it was the same thing. You're sitting guys. You're not really playing guys. You're going to start 2 of your starters, and then you're going to sit 2 of your starters, and then they're going to rotate. And again, if you're Immanuel Quickley and you're trying to learn the point guard spot, your role is going to be different dependent on who else is in the lineup with you. So if the majority of your games are not played with your regular starters who are all trying to win, it's kind of messed up. So then now he comes in to start this season, and it's like, all right, you're the point guard. Brandon Ingram's here. We're trying to win. Be the point guard. Be the lead guard. It's going to take some time to figure that out. It's going to take some time to figure out how Scotty and BI fit together with RJ. It's going to take some time to figure out, well, how's BI? Where does BI need the ball? What are the sets that we're running to get BI his touches? Because we need to get him his touches. Okay, then where do my touches come in? And then on top of that, if you're Quick, you're also hearing Darko, who we've heard multiple times say, we just need Quick to shoot threes. We need him to shoot a lot of threes. That's a lot of messaging. So you're talking about you're the starting point guard. We need you to lead the offense. We need you to get assists, but we also need you to jack up like, what is it? 6, 7, 8 threes a game. And how are those threes coming? Right? Because it's not like he's Steph Curry where he's coming off screens and they're running multiple sets for him to get him off screens. So it's catch and shoot. Is he coming down on fast breaks and jacking? We see that happen. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times the shot selection isn't that pretty. But I'm just saying overall, I don't know if he's been put in the best position to succeed so far. And he hasn't helped with being injured. Definitely hasn't helped, right? But also on top of that, when he has played, the Raptors weren't really playing winning basketball until this season. So the fact that there's been some growing pains for IQ or some tough nights for IQ, I'm not really going to knock him for that. I think it's going to take time to figure it out. And again, do I even think that he's been playing great, that he's been playing amazing the whole time? No, I wouldn't even say that. I don't even give him that, right? I think he's been up and down this season. I think he's been inconsistent this season. And I feel like if you're the Raptors, the other interesting part of all this has been the emergence of Jamal Shead, right? And if we're being honest, the Raptors offense looks a lot better when Jamal Shead is leading said offense. And I think it's because for a couple different reasons, right? I think it's because Jamal Shead, I mentioned when Quickley first got here, we saw a lot of the floater game. Like he was going downhill a lot. If you basically, his game was, I'm ready to shoot the three, but if you come out to contest, I'm blowing by you and I'm trusting my floater game. And my floater game is nice. And I feel like we've seen less and less of that as time has gone on. Whereas Jamal Shead is still playing where he's getting into the paint. And the difference for the two of them, Quickley and Shead, if you're not turning the corner and going downhill, or you're just picking up your dribble at the top of the key, you're not really running offense. Whereas Shead, if you're getting into the paint, hey, someone either has to come guard you and then someone else is open and now you can get your assist off, or you're getting to the cup and you're scoring. And Quick playing off the ball more, he's fallen into games where you just see him settling to shoot threes. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. Doesn't that sound like a high energy guy off the bench? It's a tough spot. And to be honest, I don't know the answer. I do think that going forward, the point guard that would be needed for a Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes led team is not necessarily Immanuel Quickley. Like, I think the other reason why Jamal Shead is such a better fit as well is because you need someone who can perimeter defend. Because that was always going to be the worry this season with this Raptors lineup, right? Of Quickley, RJ, Scotty, BI, and Yak. It was your perimeter defense. And we've seen the Raptors struggle with that, right? And you've seen them have games where they give a little extra run to Jakob Poeltl because he's playing good defense. You've seen Grady lose a lot of minutes because you've seen Jakob Poeltl play better defense than Grady has. And the reason why that stands out so much is because you need a Jamal Shead, or you need Ochai, or you need Jakob Poeltl. You need one of those guys to be on the floor to defend the perimeter. And IQ doesn't really do that. So if your defense isn't up to snuff, your shooting better be. And the fact that it isn't, I think that's where the disconnect has come. And that's where the fan base is kind of angry at IQ. And I also think they're angry at IQ because if he's not living up to the contract, Yak is hurt. People aren't going to really be that mad at Yak because he's not there for you to get mad at. Like, he's not in your face to get mad at. And all you're hearing is RJ trade rumors, and people might not want to get rid of RJ. Well, where are they going to focus in their negative energy to? Immanuel Quickley missing shots. So it's just a tough spot. So again, I understand where the negativity comes from, but I also just think, which going back to our conversation about all the trade talk, some patience. Some patience is needed. I think things will play out as they need to, right? There could be a trade where RJ gets moved, or you could just wait until the offseason and figure it out then. Maybe RJ really likes Toronto. Maybe he's not going to sign for as much money as he could on the open market and he'll re-sign for less. Maybe Quickley has a pretty good end to the season and then you're able to move off of that contract at the end of the year. And Jamal Shedd's emergence forces that because you're like, hey, that money could be better allocated in another way, right? But this trade talk stuff and all this, about Raptors being involved in trade talks and the Raptors being out of the play-in, all that is super interesting to me because at least it's interesting to talk about the Toronto Raptors again. And for that, I'm very happy about. Very happy about that. We got a comment here from the Moose Face. Says IQ has to live up to the contract. He's doing well this year. He plays well when he gets some rhythm going with the 5 on the floor. Totally true. But I agree with you. He does have to live up to the contract, but what that means is you need to be consistent. And to me, he's not consistent enough to be your starting point guard on a team. If you have real expectations, of winning multiple rounds, making a little bit of a run here, so far, he hasn't shown that he can be that consistent starting point guard. And a lot of that has to do with defending. Can you guard your position? Because if he can't guard his position, then that means him or RJ have to be on the bench. And I don't think you want that because you want RJ's offense. So super interesting stuff. Lots going on in Raptor land. Again, big shouts to, all the reporters that are day to day asking questions in the huddles in the media scrums, at practice every day, in the post game, like all that stuff. Big shouts to all those people. Whose articles we're talking about here? Josh Lewenberg and Michael Grange as well. Sam Amick. Great information, great sources. Read these people's articles. Read them. They have information that is very important, and they are doing the real work out there. Another comment here. I enjoy reading the comments, and it's rare that I'm doing this like live. So when I am, I'm going to read the comments. Quickley is a natural shooting guard. Until we finally make that decision, we're just that much further to getting a quick that deserves his contract. That's an interesting point. But I beg the question, though. He might be a natural shooting guard, right? Or who was I talking to the other day? And I was saying the Stephen A. Smith line from, I forget who he was talking about in the NBA draft, but his draft analysis was that he's a shooting guard masquerading as a point guard. That's kind of Immanuel Quickley, right? So I understand. He's a combo guard. He's a shooting guard, right? The problem with that is you either need your starting shooting guard, to score more consistently than Quickley does, or do a better job of guarding your position. Because unless you score a lot more, that defense doesn't add up to you being a starter in this league. It just doesn't. So you either got to score more consistently, put up more points, maybe, or you got to defend a little more. But for you to be the starting shooting guard, you got to score more. The other part of that is if he's a shooting guard and Shed starts, where's RJ? Are we talking about RJ being? See, I don't even want to get there. I need this trade deadline to come and go because this whole RJ stuff, I wish I could talk more about it, more about the behind the scenes of, my day to day and trying to put together these openings for the games that is super dependent on who's in the lineup and who's not. One day I'll talk about it more, but the trade deadline is obviously going to be super interesting because there's so much going on around the league. The Raptors aren't the only names, where they have multiple players in these talks every day. Obviously with Jimmy Butler going down for the Warriors, that's a huge loss for them. Their season hopes of whatever hopes they had of making a run are probably gone at this point. They still have the Kuminga chip, who I think his He got hurt the other night, but that's an asset, but I don't know what that could possibly bring back for them. Giannis, as bad as the Bucks have been, that's going to continue to be a topic of conversation in Milwaukee. Do they have a move that they can help this roster currently for Giannis? I don't know. I mean, I would say no, but then again, I never thought Trae Young would get traded for only CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert, right? So anything's possible. Cat's getting booed in New York. So the Knicks have been struggling. And I just want to say this too. All these people talking about, oh, well, the Knicks struggling because of the NBA Cup and because they had to go all out for the NBA Cup and now they're struggling. It's like, hold on. Are we complaining because you actually had to try really hard to win regular season games that you are paid millions of dollars for? That's what we're complaining about? Because you had to try and win the NBA Cup and then now you're on a bad stretch? Who's to say that if those games weren't the NBA Cup, that they wouldn't still be just having a bad run right now? Anyways. So what? If one of their guys would have sat one of those NBA Cup games, like that changes the bad run they're having now? That makes no sense to me at all. It's like, oh, well, every year the teams after they won the NBA Cup, you know what? They really struggled. And it's like, or in every regular season, you just have a run where you're going to struggle for about 10 to 12 games. Maybe that's it. But this whole being mad at the NBA Cup because you have to try, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Anyways, thank you everyone for tuning in to this podcast, especially the people who are watching live. Really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, make sure you bless us with the like, follow, and subscribe, all that other fun stuff. Wherever you happen to be watching this pod, just search Canada Hoops Daily. You can find us on Spotify or on Apple. Follow the pod there. If you go to YouTube, just search Sheldon Alexander or Canada Hoops Daily. The page is on Sheldon Alexander, but you'll find all the Canada Hoops Daily content. There's a page there where you can find wherever there's a new pod and all that fun stuff going up. So make sure you like and subscribe to that stuff there as well. And I just think, a cool part of all of this is just getting to talk about the Raptors and winning again. Raptors being relevant, super important, super dope, super cool. And I'm enjoying it. And I hope you are enjoying it too. You can follow me on Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. Also got the football picks for you. There's just 3 NFL games left. Those that follow me, I host and produce a Clutch Picks betting podcast for Clutch Points, the Clutch Points Network. That's been going really good this year. So 3 games left. You get our AFC and NFC championship picks. Those are out there right now as well. Lots going on. And of course, Raptors basketball, as mentioned, big Raptors game coming up in a few hours against the Portland Trailblazers. I guess that's late night tonight against the Portland Trailblazers. Raptors looking to continue their good road trip so far. They wind that up on Sunday against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and company in the Oklahoma City Thunder. That will also be a really good game. Super interesting game for sure. As you know, Shai and Lou Dort get hyped up whenever they get to play the Toronto Raptors. And then, of course, Raptors back home to take on the Knicks. So tough schedule ahead. Hopefully RJ is back. Let me do a quick search right now while I'm still on the pod and I'm on live. So, I can search this live and the people will understand that I'm searching this live. Let's see here. Nope, still don't see anything on RJ Barrett status. Still questionable for tonight's game. So the other part of all this with trying to search for RJ Barrett is a reminder that this is also a late game, right? This game's not until super late tonight. So maybe we won't find out with him being questionable. It won't be until closer to game time. Yep, still listed as questionable tonight is RJ Barrett. So hopefully he'll be back, and hopefully he'll be back against his former team, against the Knicks. Overall thoughts on everything. I know we talked a lot about the trade rumors. I don't think the Raptors are going to do anything big. If you ask me my actual opinion, I think they're just going to make a move, a smaller move, maybe moving off Ochai to get under the tax threshold. But in terms of something big, I don't think so. That Sabonis trade doesn't really make much sense. The Ja Morant move only makes sense if Darko gives you the sign off that like, hey, I got a great relationship with him. He's misunderstood. I can get to him, blah, 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 blah. That's the only way that makes sense. And Anthony Davis, I don't know. Would you trade for Anthony Davis and then try to re-sign him for big time money that he's going to want? I don't think I would do that. So yeah, a lot of the trade talk, it's fun. It's fun to discuss. It's fun to do the hypotheticals. But again, on the way out, I'll give a big shout out to all the reporters that are out here gathering the news, gathering the information, and, blessing the timeline with all the fun that we get to talk about and we get to joke around about, we get to argue and debate about in our group text. This is a lot of fun. Whole lot of fun here on the pod. And I know everyone's group texts. I touched on this earlier, but it's been a lot of fun this season getting text messages again from my friends who are sports fans. And I know the way that content goes out now, where it's all segmented again, where we think that only Raptors fans are Raptors fans and only Leaf fans are Leaf fans, and those two people aren't the same. Do you know what I mean? It's been funny to hear from my sports fan friends who just love sports and love Toronto sports, and they're messaging in to be like, hey, are the Raptors legit? Like, are we back? We back up? It's been awesome to be like, yeah, we're all right. We're going to make the playoffs. You can pay attention again. You can watch again. You can cheer again. You can buy your kid a jersey for Christmas again. It's a lot of fun. Good times happening. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody, make sure you head to the YouTube page on the way out. Bless us with that like. Bless us with that follow, that subscribe button. Really appreciate y'all for tuning in. You can find me online at Sheldon Alexander on Instagram, on Twitter, Sheldon Alexander on Instagram, and Sheldon Alexander on YouTube. Really appreciate it. Now, as I always say, I've been talking a lot. It's been an hour 23 of me just talking. It's a lot. It's a long time. Tongue-tied, need some water, probably gotta eat some food, then sit down and watch Mitch Marner hopefully lose. Story for another day. Webby ducked the smoke today because I was about to come on here and talk to Webby about the New York Mets and all the moves the Mets have been making. Talking about being back up. The Mets are back. Webby ducked the smoke. But I'll get him next week. Don't worry. And if I don't, remind me in the comments next week. Appreciate it. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this, to rhyme like this. This is Canada Hoops Daily Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.